Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and recently, since the 120 servers are not available for us to test on PvP, I've just been hanging on forums expecting any kind of messages from Blizzard saying, hey, the 120 servers are, being repaired, or we're working on it, or they're being shut down and we're just kind of discontinuing them. I've been trying to figure out what the hell's going on. So while hanging on the forums, I actually saw a very good post that I felt like it's worth bringing up. This isn't something that Blizzard is actually going to be doing, and when we're playing on 120 servers, the experience of 120 servers versus what we'll have in BFA is genuinely different in terms of, I guess, what we'll be able to do in terms of gear. I learned that gear is going to be very, very important again in World of Warcraft PvP when it comes to, well, player versus player content, but also customization of your character. Stats, trinkets, Azeroth bonuses, all of these things are going to become usable again in battlegrounds and arenas. This is something that we literally have had a whole expansion without for Legion, not having to worry about any of those things besides the item level and having the highest item level. Now we'll have to go back to worrying about stats. And this post right here just talks about, in Glad Sanctum, maybe we should have a NPC where we can buy gear from. So if you're having fun in the Glad Sanctum realm at the moment, part of it is being able to pick the gear you want with the stats you want. This is not the reality of the system in place. We're 44 days away from BFA launch, and we have to try now and change it, or it's going live. We'll have to deal with the predetermined pieces of gear with no way of choosing off stats or bonuses. Just bring back vendors the choice of what players want. We don't want RNG gear that could be totally useless 1 week if we already have a good piece in that slot that doesn't need an upgrade. I mean, honestly, I don't need to read more of this. This rings so many bells for me, and it makes sense. Don't get me wrong, like, I'm somebody who's going to be doing Mythic Plus dungeons, raids, world quests, as many as I can, and PvP, so for me, gear is not going to be an issue. Hell, I'm going to be able to get into some higher end Mythic Pluses pretty early on because I have a guild, I have a group. I'm also going to be able to get into higher level raids because I have a group. I'm going to be able to experience a lot of the content, which is, part of playing World of Warcraft. If you have a group, it's a lot easier with them. So this is something that I'm actually for, because I know that I'm somebody who used to PvP literally all the time. Literally, that's all I did is PvP. I would log on, get my BGs done, get my arenas done, and having a vendor back during Mists of Pandaria and during Warlords of Draenor was very, very nice because you could customize your gear. You could choose what stats you wanted, and that's what I was able to reach for my Outlaw with all the procs, like about 97% mastery, so offhand attacks and mastery hits were just loading it up towards my burst and giving me insane sustained damage and energy regen. So that's something that I was able to do back in Warlords of Draenor. In BFA, however, you are going to be able to get a piece of gear with Conquest, but it's going to be RNG. Now, I know that Blizzard is changing so that your secondary stats are not as strong, so getting intellect, stamina, strength, agility, those stats are going to be a lot better for you in most cases than none. Just getting that raw amount of stat, but having secondary stats and, planning around what stats you want is not going to be possible. I mean, sure, you could get, let's say you're a class that loves haste, and you love a little bit of versatility on the side, and you get that versatility haste piece, but what if you don't? What if you get mastery crit? For certain specializations, this isn't as bad. For Outlaw, as long as you have 20% crit, you should be fine for the most part. Assassination doesn't really bother. Subtlety, unless you're a master in versatility, you're not going to deal that much damage. Let's go for another spec that's even more affected by this. Fury Warrior is another spec. If you don't have enough haste, you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to have a good time and not going to have good damage. But if you have insane amounts of haste, then the spec feels really good to play. And if you can get some versatility on the side, that's fine. But that spec is one of those specs that is affected by secondary stats. And I know we're playing with gear that's like 370 item level, so it's probably not going to be the item level that we start with. Eventually we'll have to, make our way to there. I don't really know, what's going to be the highest item level by the end of the expansion. If this is going to be the highest item level 370, or is that just the entry level for like the first season? What I do know is RNG gear is not that fun. We've had a whole expansion of Legion where we had RNG legendaries, and then we had RNG pieces of gear from Mythic Plus dungeons, from raids, and even from PvP. Now, with raids, they're already taking away the capability of you getting, maybe pieces of gear that somebody in your group can use. With Master Looter, it's all going to be personal loot, it's all going to be RNG. Mythic Pluses, pretty RNG. I mean, you can play this, run the same dungeon over and over and over until that piece of gear drops, and maybe Titan Forges but that's really all you got, is just running it over and over and over. For somebody who does PvP, when you just go out and do PvP all the time, back to back to back, there are going to be some people that are just going to be doing PvP. So when you get an RNG piece of gear, I guess it's nice to have a guaranteed piece of gear, but if you can't choose the stats on it, I don't think it's just as valuable. I honestly feel that Blizzard can add some systems into this in order to change a little bit how we all play, in order to help ourselves with stats. While secondary stats are not going to be as important at first, eventually the game is going to catch up, and secondary stats, having a certain amount of some stat, is going to become important again. So we're not going to take the gear out of PvP, we're going to make it more usable and viable for PvP, but how are people going to gear? What if there's a trinket that's really good and gives you certain stats? What if the PvP trinkets are not as good? What if the piece of gear you get just doesn't give you enough stats, so the one that you have that's 15 item levels down is actually worth running because your specialization ended up being more heavy on secondary stats? I feel like adding a vendor or maybe a reforging system isn't a terrible idea, but I think a vendor would end up being a little bit better. Let's say you're somebody who does, let's say, world quests. Let's say you did a world quest and you did an emissary and you got some nice brand new let's say 340 item level shoulders. You're like, yes, I got some shoulders. Or you got maybe a chest or a cloak. And then let's say, oh, let me just mosey over to my PvP chest. Oh, hey, I got a piece of gear in there too. Let me open it up. Oh, wait, it's the same shoulders. Or if it's a shoulder piece, it's same item level, it's just different Azeroth bonuses. If you could have at least chosen what you could spend your conquest on, at least then you could have filled out a piece of gear with the right stats that you would have wanted. But now you're kind of just having to play with the RNG. So what if you end up going into a raid and you get a piece of shoulder? What if you do mythic pluses and at the end of the week you get a piece of shoulder? And what if you go into PvP chest at the end of the week and also you get a piece of shoulder? I mean, that will be enough to drive somebody mad. And I just feel like after having an expansion full of RNG such as Legion, while RNG is not terrible, I feel like adding RNG into gear, RNG that a lot of people ask not to, continue into BFA, I feel that adding those parts of the game back into BFA is not a good idea. Don't get me wrong, I'm very excited about BFA. I think it's going to be a great expansion, and Blizzard have already taken steps in order to make BFA a great PvP expansion. We can actually see a lot of those changes and a lot of those aspects being applied to the game on the beta, and a lot of changes being added every single day. But I feel that if you are gonna, take steps towards a better PvP expansion, you might as well commit to the rest of the steps. And I feel like adding a vendor system or adding some sort of a system where you can guarantee what kind of piece you get, maybe even choose what stats you want in that piece, will be a better system in the future. I hope that they consider this. Maybe if they consider adding one in patch 8.1 or anytime soon, maybe the new system will be better than what we expect. But so far, having a vendor on PvP servers has been absolutely amazing. And not to have that going into BFA, I feel like will feel pretty weird after playing beta as long as I have. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I'd like to give you guys thoughts. Again, I'm still positive, still very, very optimistic about BFA. I feel like Blizzard has done a great job with it so far. But having vendors on 110 servers or 120 servers would be kind of nice if that were to make it into the final version of the game, or at least to some proportion, just some aspects of a vendor system. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.